This is a synopsis of the Big Biller Summit interview with Gavin Ingham, and I have to declare a degree of self-interest and bias here, because whilst we've been buying Gavin's products and some training from him over the last decade or so, I've actually come to know Gavin very well on a personal basis. I hope it doesn't cloud my judgment, but I have to say that I have got a bit of a challenge with Gavin's content, and my challenge is that listening to it, there is so much there that I struggle to get my head around everything. And then when I started to read the transcript, there was very little that wasn't really relevant. So whilst I'm going to try and give you some of the key points here, what I would urge everybody to do is actually get hold of the transcript and read it, because there's so much in here. It's just so valuable. Anyway, his interview was titled How You Can Outperform, Outsell and Outgun the Competition. So it's a good title. And Gavin talks about what separates great sales superstars from normal or average salespeople. And what he says is invariably it's the right sales attitude. And he calls it playing from a 10. So when you ask most people what makes a great salesperson, they'll talk about persistence, tenacity, determination. They've got goals, they're enthusiastic, they've got charisma, they're motivated. But actually these aren't skills, are they? This is about attitude. It's about how you actually access your skill. We all know people that know how to do something, but how often they actually do it to the best of their ability, maybe somewhat far from 100% of the time. So Gavin talks about the fact that when people join the recruitment sector, they're often very motivated. They start out with the right attitude, they're in the right place, and guess what, they do deals. And we've got a name for it. We call it beginner's luck. But actually it's nothing to do with beginner's luck per se. It's actually about attitude. And he goes on to talk about the fact that after a period of time we get knocked about, we get in the day-to-day slog and grind, and we drop maybe to a 6 or a 7. But actually it's just not good enough for the recruitment sector. It's not good enough for selling. When we're dealing with somebody on a one-to-one, we have to be dealing from a 10. And when I got into reading the transcript, I realised that Gavin's put a lot of thought into working out how we can actually design our day so that we can actually become motivated to work from a 10. Now, it's not about walking around with a stupid grin, but it's about having certain strategies and methodology in place to ensure that we can actually get the best out of our daily performance, our skill sets, based on having a 10 out of 10 attitude. So, he's talking about the fact that just good enough isn't sufficient these days. Companies want to be dealing with the best, whether it be the best accountants, lawyer, doctor, or indeed recruiter. They're not prepared to look up to deal with mediocrity. And of course it's hard to maintain the 10, isn't it? Because if we've just lost a placement, we've had somebody turn down a job, well, how do we actually keep in that optimum state? Well, Gavin gives us a couple of clues. The first one, he says, is work out for you, everybody's different, work out for you, what does a 10 actually look like? Now, it's not talking about walking around with an inane grin or a sort of some daft grimace on your face. It's talking about what you need to be able to make good quality phone calls, cold calls. You need to be motivated to pick up that phone, and then about having the right attitude, about the ability to build empathy or to have an understanding of your client. And it's about us being professional, authoritative, knowledgeable. So for him, playing from a 10 is about having the right state of mind at the right time. You almost need to be able to click on and turn it off if you need to, but certainly it's a bit like going onto a stage and acting, being ready to make that call and deal with that person for the very first time. And that's what Gavin believes makes the difference between somebody that's failing or just mediocre and somebody who's exceptional and doing very well in any market, particularly today's market. So for him, the second part of the question is about how you actually put strategies in place to achieve what you're going to do, how you're going to get up to this 10. And he says that a lot of people will struggle to get motivated. They'll struggle to achieve this on a consistent basis. And he asks people, why is it that they're actually doing this job? Let's find out the reasons why they've got a desire to do this in the first place. And it's about digging deep. And everybody's got different reasons. Is it about being respected? Is it about being the best that you can be in your own view? Is it because you want money, or is it about you want to provide for your family? But he reckons that it's important to know why people are doing this job. So assuming you know why and why it's important to you, he says that there are 2 or 3 different ways and lots of examples of how to actually create this motivated state where you're going to behave as if you're working from a 10. For some people, it's about visualising the outcome of a particular call. You know, we all know about a lot of the athletes, the Olympic athletes. If you watch people like Usain Bolt, they seem to be in a kind of a semi-trance because they've actually run the race before in their head a million times. Lots of golfers will be practicing mentally even before they get onto the golf course, visualising the call, having the conversation, working out what the outcome is going to sound like. And of course, we all know stories of people that have visualised things that have got those outcomes. So if you can visualise yourself actually getting the arranging the interview, or arranging the visit with your client, or dealing with your candidate on the phone who says yes, they're interested, and working out what you're going to say in advance and working through all the ramifications and what they could say and how you could deal with an objection and so forth, that is much more likely to give you your result. Excuse me. Physiology is another good one for people that don't know. Physiology is about the way we sit, the way that we hold ourselves. You know, just by getting up, moving around, taking a break, having a cup of coffee, anything like that will help you get in the right state. And running little competitions with your friends, setting yourself mini targets, and when you achieve them, you know, having a reward, get yourself a Starbucks or a chocolate bar or whatever it happens to be. You know, ring your spouse or your friend or your partner and say you made a really good call, and get them to be part of your support mechanism. Get them to give you a well done, thumbs up, good job conversation. Also, I found this painfully fascinating. I did wonder whether I should even mention this, because I know a lot of people won't actually physically pick up the transcript, but nonetheless, I'm not going to avoid the difficult bit. He asks us to think about the other people in the office, maybe your manager or your director, ouch, on a day-to-day basis, and look at them and think about, well, from a positive sales attitude perspective, how would I score them today? Now I really do know that I don't always behave in a way that makes people think that I'm behaving from a 10. And Gavin says he thinks it is immediately obvious that the vast majority of people do not play from a 10 the vast majority of the time. So if other people are not motivated, it's probably easy to see, but it's a bit more difficult to recognise it in yourself. And you could say, rubbish, that doesn't affect me, and I'm always motivated. But whilst people can be a bit defensive about their own attitude, the reality is that invariably there is a little bit of work to be done in terms of raising their game and becoming a little bit more up for it. And of course, if you notice other people's states, maybe they've had a difficult call and they've sort of taken a bit of a knock, or they've had a deal that's gone belly up, well, of course, if it affects them, it's going to affect you in the same way. And when you think about the calls that you have with prospects or candidates, if you're doing some proactive recruiting, if the call doesn't go very well, you had a great call first time, and then your second, third calls, the prospect slams the phone down, and you say, you know what, today's going to be a crap day. And they go from this really, really good place to ending up with very little in between. They go from a 10 to, let's say, a 2 or a 3. And really at that point they shouldn't pick up the phone anymore. They should give themselves a break, go and get some fresh air, and press the reset button. Just reset your attitude and think about, right, if I was going to hear me making a call, what would I want to hear? And it probably wouldn't want to be somebody calling with a 2 or a 3 out of 10. Now, Gavin talks about in recruitment, what often happens is that there's people, when they look at their business, that they had big accounts, they're managing accounts, they've got a lot of new business coming in, suddenly the phone stops ringing and councils stop recruiting. Well, on that basis, they've actually got to start to talk to new people and start to become more focused on prospecting. And to do that, Gavin believes that it's important to have some kind of structure to your day. Because otherwise, if you're not in the habit of being proactive, if you're used to being reactive with a lot of job orders to work on, a lot of temporary assignments, or even retained business, you need to reset your view about how we're going to generate business. So Gavin asks us to consider, when we look at our day and we look at our tasks, well, ask ourselves, well, is this task actually bringing me in new sales? Because if you're not doing sales generation activity on a regular basis, clearly you need to be spending more time on this. So I think we also link this up with attitude, that if we're not making enough calls because we've been used to historical accounts that give us a lot of business, and maybe we're not always working from a 10 and we're being expected to get on the phone, it's not a very good combination to start with. So Gavin says, give yourself a bit of a break. If you need to get yourself remotivated, get out, have a walk, get a bit of fresh air, reset your buttons. How do I need to get remotivated? And I don't think that I've ever actually really spoken to people about genuine motivational strategies. But we've got to work with ourselves individually to find out what it is that gives us a bit of a spark. And Gavin's got some great ideas. If we're connecting with people on a first-time basis, we've got to do it with a good attitude. I think we'll all agree. Whether we do it via visualization, self-talk, focus, competition, we've got to get back on it and we've got to focus. Now, Gavin asked us a question, if we are motivated, what are we then going to start saying to the client? And he makes a point, which is that very rarely do we actually come across as being interested in the client. He talks about it being the elephant in the room. They know it, we know it, we know they know it, they know we know that they know about it, but clients and prospects think that we're just interested in doing the deal. And of course we're here to make money, we're here to bill, we're here to generate fees. But if we go into that sales mode too soon, then the prospect or the client is going to take a view and say, actually, because I've got so many opportunities to deal with recruiters and you don't sound any different, I'm not going to work with you. We need to be able to illustrate a genuine level of interest for the prospect. We need to do perhaps a little bit of research, or at least we need to know a little bit about the sector so we can have a conversation with that prospect about the kind of business they're in. And we need to dig deeper and find out exactly what it is that's going on in their business, what the potential problems are, what the pain issues are. And Gavin talks later about, when we actually find out what the issues are, what the challenges are, don't be so quick to offer a solution, because that potential problem might not be such a big deal, but hopefully we'll come to it in a little while. I'm just going to read pretty much through the notes. So Gavin talks about the number of calls that we should be doing, and of course different trainers have got a different view, but certainly if you look at the IT sector, it's all about make 100 calls a day. Well, Gavin said that in that sector you need to make less calls, probably 30 a day, but make sure those calls are longer, where you've actually got something different to say. Got any jobs, got any jobs, got any jobs, doesn't work anymore. if you're going to attract somebody's attention, you've got to be engaged with them. So I'm going to read this out. When you ring your clients up, you need to demonstrate to them that you've actually got the integrity to do some research beforehand. Demonstrate to them that you understand them and you want to understand their market. In fact, he's got a rule of thumb. Before you speak to any client in any situation, you need to put yourself in the client's shoes and you need to ask this simple question: what would I reasonably be expected to know here? So if we combine a VBR, a valid business reason, with a little bit of knowledge, that's much more powerful than just saying, got any jobs? Now, there's no excuse not to have some research. You've got LinkedIn, the internet and databases, but let's get some information in advance. So Gavin talks about not persuading the client, not selling the client. And of course we need to know how to handle objections, but essentially understanding what the client actually needs. And he talks about, from his own history, about going into consulting sessions and sales directors saying, what's our pitch? And I think, you know, we have the same situation. What are we going to be saying? What are we going to say to people that's going to make them sit up and listen to what we're offering? But Gavin asked the question, what does the client want to hear? What does the client really need? What's bothering the client? Because often you come off a phone, you've had a conversation, you say, oh, the prospect was dreadful, they're a waste of time, she was awful, they just didn't get me. Well, whose responsibility is that to be got? It's our responsibility. If we've made the phone call, our communication will hopefully illustrate what we can do for them. So maybe we just didn't put it across in a way which they understood. We've got to try and put ourselves in our clients' shoes and work out that we demonstrate that we're interested in what they need, but also what their challenges are. Sometimes people are so quick to offer a solution. You know, we hear the problem. For example, the CVs I'm getting through aren't of the right quality. And then we go into sales mode and we start saying, well, of course, you know, the CVs from us, we're much more selective, they're very appropriate, and we're never going to waste your time with irrelevant CVs. But actually, that isn't enough, because whilst it might be a small frustration for the client, they might be paying 10% for that. And you might come across and say, well, actually, we're going to do a better job of sending quality CVs or better qualified or brief candidates, and our fees are 17%. The client might well turn around and say, well, actually, I can handle the fact the CVs are a bit iffy for 10%. There's no way I'm going to pay nearly double for just a few better quality CVs or better briefed or better researched or shortlisted candidates. We need to dig deeper and find out what the main issues really are. Don't assume that an initial problem is exactly what is going to win you the business by you giving a quick or a smart response. He's saying, is this a problem worth solving? It's quite interesting. Now, they're probably going to get 100 phone calls a month, maybe more. And Gavin suggests that, you know, we shouldn't be so arrogant as to think that what we're going to say in 30 seconds is going to persuade people. Now, of course, we need an elevator pitch. We need something that we can say within 60 seconds that does make us stand out. But once we've got through to the decision maker, once they've got their attention, we've got to listen better. We've got to ask better quality questions. You know, if somebody says we're not getting very good CVs, well, what does that mean to you? What challenges does that create? How would you like that to improve? Just open-ended questions will give you much more information. So don't go for the quick win. Dig deeper. Because for every recruiter that's heard the response, well, we're not getting very good CVs, the majority of them are going to give a quick fix response. Well, they can't all get the business. If we want to be ahead on this, we've got to make sure we're asking better quality questions. The other thing that he talks about is oftentimes recruiters will rush headlong into working on something that actually they're not going to fill, because they're so busy scrabbling around for a job to work on. Hey, I've got a vacancy, let me get going. I don't need to make any more presentations, I don't need any more cold calling, no more follow-up calls. I'm working on this assignment. But actually they're working on the wrong jobs. And Gavin is very, very keen, and I think we'd all recognise that we need to be a little bit more analytical about what we're working on. Is the salary appropriate? Can we find the skills? Is it exclusive? Let's make sure that we're not working on vacancies where the client's already at second or third interview. He asks us whether it's better for us to spend a little bit more time, an extra half a day, on the phone generating a vacancy that we are going to really fill, than getting off the phone too quickly and working on a vacancy that actually we're never going to fill. That it might be good to say to the manager or the director that I'm working on these vacancies, but you know what, deep down, your probability of filling it isn't all that high. Now, in terms of prospecting and lead generation, Gavin says prospecting deliberately doesn't necessarily mean cold calling, or it could include cold calling. He says we need a strategic plan. To make sure we're putting aside some time. Sorry, I'm reading as I'm talking, but I just want to make sure I get this right. That's it. He talks, going back to the earlier point, he talks about the fact that most people find a reason to stop prospecting. Again, it's about this, I've got this great vacancy, I'm going to start working on it. And it's actually probably not the right thing to do. Now, he also says that, he's not suggesting that we fight reality, and that, there's so much business out there, we're tripping over it. But he does believe there are opportunities out there for great recruiters, that there are clients out there that want to work with recruiters that can add genuine value to the process and that can find them exceptional candidates. They want to work with agencies that are going to be there for the long haul, as he calls it. So he says that we should start working out how we can add value. But before we do that, interesting idea, he says, get yourself a piece of paper or a big bit of card and start to work on some kind of storyboard of how we can add value to our clients. Now we've got the USPs, but maybe some success stories, examples of how, by us doing a great job of recruiting an exceptional candidate, we've helped a company save money, or we've helped them improve their business systems, or we've helped them land an account or manage a problem. And he says if you can put that together, that's a really nice thing to have focused on you. It'll help you work from a 10, particularly if you're having a bit of a bad afternoon, you've got that in front of you. It will help buoy or help support your belief system in terms of what we do. We need to believe in ourselves, the company, the product, but we need to believe in what we're doing, that we're actually adding value. And if we don't believe that we're going to add a real difference, really there's no point in picking up the phone, is there? We're in the wrong business if that's the case. He also talks about establishing testimonials, talking to your existing clients. And I really like this. I've gone out and got testimonials for years, but I've never really thought about what could happen from it. So he says whether it's a written, a verbal or a video testimonial, as we're now doing, what are the three things that happen? Well, first off, it makes the recruiter feel great, because the recruiter recognises, you know what, yeah, I did do that great job for that client. And it might have been a couple of months ago, and it might help you improve your self-belief and help you go from a 10 again. Number two is that it helps the client reinforce why they were working with you in the first place. So it strengthens that relationship. And here's the great bit, the third element is that often the client will then either, when you're taking the testimonial or a couple of days later, ring up and say, you know what, it was good to chat the other day, I'm really glad we got together to talk about what you've done for us, and you know what, I've got a project coming up I'd like you to work on. And the number of times that I've had conversations with companies, review meetings, and they've said, look, we've got no business right now, but come down, let's talk anyway. And I've come back with some business to fill. So Whether you think of it as simply another VBR or a genuine reason to be motivated yourself, the testimonial can add massive value, both to our arsenal for marketing, but also of getting the client to re-engage with us and think about what we can do for him. I also like this idea of success books, whether you use it in a hardback journal or some kind of scrapbook. But he says that when we do a great piece of work, we should write the story down. We should write the history, and it becomes part of the company folklore. What a great job we've done for that client, how we felt about it, the story. Was it smooth sailing, or were there some challenges and some pitfalls on the way? Get it down. Maybe get your testimonial from your client as well, and that will all help to becoming part of, our DNA, if you like. And you can use it, when you're going out and about and visiting clients and prospects, and say, look, let me just tell you about some of the stories. Maybe we'll get it on the internet, for example. I'm going to read this out. For the vast majority of people, selling is relatively simple, and yet it's also incredibly difficult to do. And Gavin says he thinks part of the reason for that is attitude. He thinks that most jobs you can do from a 5 or from a 6 or maybe a 7. But in selling, you can't. And he thinks in any job, it said, get to 10 and stay at 10, it's going to be really, really challenging. He's also slightly contentious here. He says that anybody with an element of intelligence and a degree of commitment can go and get a degree after 3 or 4 years. It might not be a great degree, but they can get a degree. And then they come out into the workplace and they've got to deliver a 10 in recruitment. And when we look at a lot of salespeople, you know what? The bar to entry isn't that high. You don't need a degree. You don't need a previous qualification. You just got to pass an interview. So most people get in because they interview very well. And then they get trained and they get developed. But that ability to be that 10 every day is the toughest piece of the jigsaw. So what he gives us is some tips to help us get to a 10. First thing is, stop making excuses. Get to a 10. Work out exactly what your 10 looks like. Get yourself into a 10 and get on the phone. Simple as that. Whether you're interviewing, prospecting, or out on a visit, remember, showtime, play from a 10. Of course, we get pulled from pillar to post. It's our job to make sure that we're focusing on what we're doing. So his point number 2 is dedicate time to selling. And in other Big Biller Summit interviews, they talk about modularization, planning your day, for example. He also likes the idea of working out how much you want to earn, how much you need to bill, and working it backwards so you know what your own individual figures are. How many calls do you need to make a day? How many first interviews do you need to arrange? How many offers do you need to secure to hit your own target so you can pay for your bigger mortgage, your holiday, or whatever you need to do to put money on you can do with your money when you put it on the table. Number 3 for him is about prospecting new clients every day. And he says that whether it be cold calling or doing account management calls, you've got to be taking the time. And he said for most people, doing 10 genuine, honest to God, real decision maker calls a day is what you need to do. But you've got to do it consistently. A day or a week at a time is not enough. It's every single day for every week that you're in the business. And focus on the questions. What are we talking about when we're speaking to these prospects? What really matters to them? Most recruiters just aren't client-centric enough. They present, they sell what they're offering, but they don't ask enough questions about what the client's looking for and think about responding in a way that's going to add value. Another area which Gavin believes people fall down on is objection handling. He's written a pretty good book about it, objections, objections, objections. But for most recruiters, objection handling is pretty weak. They spend a little bit of time on it, but they don't practice it, they don't role play enough, so it doesn't become second nature. and they wonder why they're not getting past enough gatekeepers to get to the decision maker, and they wonder why ultimately they're not actually closing enough opportunities. He talks about doing a little bit of research, not just picking up the phone. It doesn't have to be a lot, but just 30 seconds in advance, a little bit about the business or a little bit about the sector. And if you're ringing a lot of companies within one sector, do a bit more research, know who are the movers and the shakers, know what's the new technology, what are the stories in that particular sector. So for an engineering or air conditioning, let's know what's going on in that field. I love this one. Work out who are the big billers or the success stories. Find out about them. The Big Biller series is a great example of finding out what people that are doing a great job do. If we know what they do, we can mimic, we can copy. Somebody once said, success leaves clues. Just do what the successful people do, and you know what? You're more than halfway there. If you want to lose weight, look at somebody who's not heavy. Look at somebody who's thin. Do they run? Do they have a different regime of diet? Do they take nutritional supplements? But I bet they don't go down to Greg's every day and stuff themselves with cream cakes. Find out what successful people do. And if you don't have anybody within your own business that you want to emulate, go and find them outside. There's a whole resource out there. So I think that Gavin's view is about rolling with the best. It's about exposing yourself to books and CDs and DVDs. And of course he would say that because he's an author and he's a sales trainer and he's a speaker. But he's not talking about buying just his stuff. He's talked about the number of books that he's read over the last 20 years. I've read a lot, but he's read even more. And that's his job. He needs to know who's great, whose writing is brilliant. But he says if you only get one great idea, if you add that into your armoury, that's going to make a massive difference. Don't hang around with the whiners, the whingers. Hang around with the people that are doing well, and you'll do well yourself. So that's it. That's the end of the Gavin Ingham précis. It wasn't so much for précis because there was so much in there. I really do urge you to get hold of one of the transcripts. There's so much, if you listen to it, you're going to have to slow it down and stop it. But if you read it, you can underline it, you can score it. For my money, it's probably one of the best of the sessions that we heard. So good luck with that.